The candles burned low in Renly Baratheon's pavilion, their flames bowing and straightening with each gust of wind that worried at the canvas walls. The night beyond was full of the sounds of an army at uneasy rest. The clink of mail, distant laughter roughened by wine, the whicker of horses, the rattle of dice. Within, however, the world had narrowed to a table, a map, and the two figures standing opposite one another across it. Renly leaned on his fists, rings glinting on his fingers, dark hair falling in loose curls around his face. He looked tired for once, the mirth that so often danced in his eyes dulled, but not gone. Green and gold silk pooled at his shoulders, a clasp shaped like a stag's head catching the light. Catelyn Stark watched him, the lines at the corners of her eyes carved deep by loss and endurance, hands folded tightly in front of her. The air smelled of tallow, parchment, and the faint copper tang of steel. "You ask too much," Catelyn said at last, her voice low but unshaken. "You ask a mother to tell her son to bend the knee, when the man who ordered his father's death still sits that throne." Renly's mouth curved. "Sits for now," he said. "Not for long. I mean to be the man who unseats him, Lady Stark. When I am king, your son will not bend the knee as a supplicant, but as an ally. There is a difference." "You wear a crown already," she replied. "You ask me to tell Robb to throw away the crown his men raised for him in their grief, in their fury. The North remembers. Do you?" Renly straightened, stepping around the table. He moved with the careless grace of a man whose body had never betrayed him, whose charm had opened more doors than any sword ever had. "I remember," he said more softly. "I remember Eddard Stark's hand on my shoulder when I was a boy in King's Landing, steady as a tower. I remember his justice, and I remember how Joffrey Baratheon repaid that loyalty by striking off his head." At Joffrey's name, something in Catelyn's gaze turned to ice. Renly's fingers brushed the antlered crown at his brow as if it were still an unfamiliar weight. "I will not be Joffrey," he said. "Let your son keep his title, call him king in the north if that soothes wounded pride. Let him hold his lands as he sees fit. I ask only that he recognize me as king of the realm and not tear the realm in two." "The realm is already torn," Catelyn answered, "and every man who names himself king pulls at the rents until the cloth comes apart in his hands." Outside the pavilion, Brienne of Tarth stood as solid as one of the carved stone guardians of Storm's End. The night pressed close about her, thick and humid, the promise of rain heavy on the air. Her hand rested on the pommel of her sword, fingers curled around the leather-wrapped grip, ready. The torches at either side of the entrance guttered, casting orange light over the polished planes of her armor and the faint, perpetual frown that seemed carved into her features. Men passed by now and again, Tyrell retainers in green cloaks, Stormland knights with stags on their chests, squire boys balancing helms and wineskins. Some gave her uneasy glances as they went, their eyes skittering away from the tall woman in steel as if afraid she might take those looks for mockery and answer with steel. Brienne ignored them all. Words slid off her like rain off mail. Her duty was within the tent and just beyond its walls. The wind rose, worrying at her cloak, making the canvas above her creak and snap. She shifted her weight, scanning the encampment. The glow of scattered fires, the line of picketed horses, the dim bulk of siege towers and engines crouched like slumbering beasts in the darkness. Somewhere in that maze of shadows lay Storm's End, defiant and dour in the distance, and beyond it, Stannis Baratheon with his tight mouth and tighter sense of justice. Brienne disliked thinking of Stannis. Every time she recalled his face, the image tangled with another. Renly's smile, bright as sun on the sea, the way his hand had rested warm and heavy on her shoulder when he had named her to his Rainbow Guard. The memory made her throat tighten. She swallowed it down, eyes narrowing as the torchlight flickered strangely, bending as if under the weight of some unseen hand. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to exhale. The sound of the encampment dimmed, as though she listened from beneath water. Brienne's skin prickled beneath her mail. She shifted again, fingers tightening on her sword. There was no visible threat, no clang of armor or whisper of bowstring, yet every instinct in her screamed that something was wrong. She took one step closer to the tent flap, head tilting as if she might hear what her eyes could not see. The candles wavered, then leapt higher, their flames thin and blue at their cores. Catelyn felt the hairs on her arms stir beneath her sleeves. The air had changed again, as if the night itself had slipped into the tent, pressing cold hands over her mouth and nose. Renly's words died half-finished as he turned his head toward the entrance. "Did you feel?" he began. The canvas behind him rippled. Catelyn's gaze snapped to it, expecting a draft, a hand pushing from outside. Instead, she saw the wall darken, the shadow there deepening beyond sense. A smear of black that became an arm, a shoulder, the suggestion of a face without features. It stepped forward soundlessly, sliding free of the canvas as easily as a man might step through a curtain. No wind stirred, no footfall sounded, but the candles shrank, cowering in their pools of wax. "Renly," Catelyn said, the name catching in her throat. Her hand went to her knife, too late, too slow. The thing raised its arm. In its hand was a sword made of absence, a blade that devoured light rather than reflecting it. Catelyn's mind recoiled from it, refusing to understand. Her body moved anyway. She lunged across the table, maps crumpling beneath her palms, inkpots tipping and spilling black rivers. The sword fell. The tent flap burst inward with a crack of leather and wood. Brienne came in like a thunderbolt, shoulder first, the force of her entrance knocking one of the torch brackets askew. Light flared behind her, roaring back in an orange rush. In that instant, the sword of shadow met flesh. Renly cried out, the sound sharp and shocked. The blade kissed his throat, carving a red smile across the skin, but the angle had changed. Instead of biting deep into the soft warmth where life pulsed, it scored along the side, shallow compared to what it had meant to be. Blood sprayed, hot and bright against the pale linen of his shirt. Brienne slammed into him, shoulder driving into his chest, knocking him sideways and down. Her gauntlet hand passed through the shadow's arm. It was like plunging her fingers into ice water made solid. Pain lanced up to her elbow, white and absolute. She gritted her teeth and roared, as if sheer fury could give substance to the thing and let her break it. The shadow flickered. For an instant, Brienne saw a face in it, the hint of a stern jaw, a bar of a mouth she thought she knew. Then the candles surged back to proper flame, and the shadow blew apart like smoke in a high wind. The tent was a riot of motion again. Catelyn groping for Renly, Renly choking on his own blood, Brienne kneeling over them both with her sword half drawn, searching for an enemy that no longer had a shape. "Hold him," the maester snapped, his voice cracking like a whip through the confusion. "If he thrashes, I'll take his whole throat instead of stitching it." Catelyn moved before anyone else could, setting down the basin of water with a sharp clink and pressing her hands to Renly's shoulders. His muscles quivered beneath her fingers, slick with sweat. His eyes were wide, the white stark in his dark face, his lips working around a hoarse rasp as if words still fought their way up from his chest. "You mustn't speak," she said, leaning close so he would see her, hear her. "Save your strength, your grace. Breathe. Only breathe." He tried to laugh, a bubbling sound that made fresh blood seep from the edges of the bandage the maester had pressed to his neck. The man, Maester Lomace, Catelyn remembered belatedly, was all swift, practical movements, his chain clinking softly as he threaded a curved needle with red-dyed gut. The lantern light painted hollows beneath his eyes. "Lucky," Lomace muttered, peeling back the blood-soaked cloth to peer at the wound. "Another inch and we'd be sewing you together for the Silent Sisters, not for your wife." "My wife would object," Renly whispered, the words little more than breath against Catelyn's cheek. She swallowed hard and tightened her grip. Behind them, she could sense the tent filling, the press of bodies at the entrance. Loras Tyrell's sharp, furious voice demanding admittance, the deeper rumble of Stormland lords, the higher, anxious tones of servants and squires. Brienne stood between them and the bed, a living shield in steel, her face pale beneath the torchlight. She cradled her right arm against her chest, fingers still trembling, though she tried to hide it behind the hard set of her jaw. "What was it?" Lomace asked without looking up, his needle biting into flesh with the swift, sure motions of long practice. "A blade? An arrow? Gods. I've seen cleaner wounds from a boar's tusk." Catelyn opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. The words tasted like madness. A shadow stepped out of the wall, a sword of night. I watched it cut him. Her hands tightened slightly, and Renly hissed at the added pressure. She forced herself to ease, to breathe. "An assassin," she said at last, picking the least impossible word. "A very skilled assassin." Brienne's gaze flicked to her, a quick, questioning glance, as if wondering whether Catelyn had chosen not to see what she herself had felt burning along her bones. The knight's own arm throbbed with a bone-deep ache, as if frostbite had seared the flesh from within. She flexed her fingers, the leather of her glove creaking faintly. "Whoever he was," Lomace grunted, tying off a knot and reaching for fresh bandages. "He missed his mark. The cut is ugly but shallow. Keep the wound clean, the stitches dry, and pray you take no fever." Renly's eyes rolled toward Brienne, unfocused but seeking. For a moment she hesitated, then stepped closer, boots scraping on the canvas-covered floor. Catelyn shifted to make room but did not remove her hands. Renly's gaze fixed on the tall knight's face as if on a star through cloud. "You," he rasped. "You came." Brienne bowed her head, guilt and relief warring in her chest. "Too late, your grace," she said. "I should have been here sooner." "Just on time," he murmured, lids fluttering. "Stay." Outside, the news traveled faster than any raven. One moment the encampment was only restless. The next, it boiled. Shouts leapt from tent to tent, carried on the wind. "The king's been attacked. Assassins in the night. Magic, they say. Dark magic." Loras Tyrell heard only the first word. "King." His heart lurched against his ribs, then hammered so hard he thought it might crack the bones that held it in. He shoved past a pair of Stormland spearmen, scarcely hearing their protest. His hand fell to the hilt of his sword, and he nearly drew it just to clear a path. "Loras!" Margaery's voice caught him like a hook between the shoulders. "Ser Loras, wait." He turned, breath steaming in the cool air. His sister approached with quick, measured steps, her green skirts gathered in one hand, the other clutching her cloak to her throat. Her face was composed, but he could see the tension in the set of her mouth, the brightness of her eyes in the torchlight. Behind her, a phalanx of Tyrell men-at-arms formed a living wall against the press of the panicking camp. "What have you heard?" she demanded, coming to a halt before him. "Is it true?" "They say he's wounded," Loras said. His tongue felt thick and clumsy. "They say..." He couldn't finish the sentence. The images came unbidden anyway. Renly lying still, his easy smile gone, his hands cold. For a heartbeat, the world reeled. Margaery's fingers caught his wrist, steadying him with a surprising firmness. "Then we go to him," she said, "together, and we do not run as frightened children, Ser Loras. We walk as the king's sworn and his queen-to-be." He stared at her, chest heaving, then nodded. It cost him something to loosen his grip on his sword, to smooth his cloak and lift his chin. The armor he buckled around himself now was not steel but performance. Renly admired a good show as much as any man in court. Margaery knew the value of such things even better than he. "When we enter," she continued, lowering her voice as they began to move, "you do not weep and you do not rage. You stand at his side like a golden wall. You understand." Loras swallowed. "And what will you do, sweet sister?" She gave him a smile that did not reach her eyes. "I will make sure everyone in that tent leaves believing that no knife, no arrow, no sorcery, and no brother's envy can undo Renly Baratheon. If he draws breath, that is the truth I will give them." It was a fragile faith, yet he clung to it as they approached the pavilion. Soldiers parted before them, some bowing awkwardly, others simply staring, mouths agape. The sight of the king's betrothed striding toward his tent with her brother at her side steadied the wavering line of courage in more than one breast. Hope could be as contagious as fear, if given the right face. At the entrance, a pair of Stormland guards hesitated, hands crossed on their spears. Loras's hand brushed his sword again in warning. "Out of our way," he said, tone flat and dangerous. Margaery laid a hand on his arm, then turned her gaze onto the guards, sweet and implacable as winter sunlight. "The king will want his betrothed and his sworn brother," she said, "unless you mean to explain to him why you barred us." They moved. By the time the first panic had ebbed, the tent had settled into a hushed, brittle calm. The troop of lords and captains who had pushed their way in at the first shout had been sent away in careful, measured doses, like patients given bitter drafts. Maester Lomaise had finished his work and shuffled off muttering about rest. His hands stained red to the wrists. Only a handful remained. Renly lay propped against a pile of pillows, his throat swathed in clean linen that smelled faintly of vinegar and herbs. Someone had taken the time to smooth his hair back from his face. He clutched a cup of watered wine in one hand, though he had not yet drunk from it. The pain etched fine lines around his eyes, but there was a curl to his mouth that Catelyn recognized. The expression of a man already turning even his own attempted murder into a story he might tell at another's expense. Margaery sat beside him, her hand curled lightly around his. It was a careful touch, as if she knew the weight of each finger might be measured and added to the burden on his body. Her smile, when she looked at him, was a softer version of the one she had shown the guards. It did not quite hide the tension in the angle of her jaw, but it came close. "You are beautiful even when you bleed, my king," she said lightly, "though I must ask you not to make a habit of it. It will set a fashion among the lesser lords, and I am tired of washing blood from lace." Renly's laugh came out raw, catching at the edges, but it was a laugh all the same. "I'll try to limit my near-fatalities to special occasions," he croaked. "Feast days, tourneys, the like." Loras stood at the foot of the bed, eyes fixed on Renly's breathing, counting the rise and fall of his chest as if he could will the rhythm to continue by attention alone. In the dimness beyond them, Brienne loomed, a silent, armored presence, her injured arm bound in a makeshift sling. She refused to sit, though a stool had been offered, and the shadows in the corners of the tent clung to her like reluctant companions. Catelyn watched them all from near the map table, feeling the currents of fear and relief, devotion and calculation, swirl around her. It was a strange court, this makeshift throne room of canvas and rope. The man at its center had just been brushed by death's hand. Already, the work of spinning that wound into something useful had begun. "You saw it," Renly said suddenly, turning his head toward Catelyn. His eyes had sharpened. "You and Ser Brienne both. Do not think I missed the way you looked at each other when you spoke of assassins." A hush fell over the little circle. Margaery's fingers tightened slightly on his. Loras shifted, hand falling to the pommel of his sword out of habit. Catelyn chose her words with care. "I saw something I have no name for," she said. "Something that stepped out of your tent wall and tried to kill you before my eyes. And I felt it," Brienne added quietly, speaking for the first time since the maester had left. "It was cold, your grace, like putting your arm through a hole in the world." Renly absorbed their words in silence. For a man so given to laughter, his stillness was disconcerting. The candlelight carved shadows beneath his cheekbones, emphasizing the hollows there, the faint smear of dried blood at the edge of the fresh bandage. When he spoke, his voice was hoarser but no less certain. "Stannis," he said. It was not a question. The name fell between them like a stone thrown into a still pool, sending unseen ripples outward. Catelyn felt the hair on the back of her neck prickle, as if the shadow's cold had returned at the sound. "We do not know that," she replied carefully. "We know only that it was not a man of flesh and blood who sought your life. It came from the darkness," Brienne said, like a shadow cast by a man who was not there. "But I thought," She hesitated, brow furrowing. For a moment, I thought I saw a face I recognized. Whose? Loras demanded, more sharply than he intended. His knuckles whitened on the hilt at his hip. If you have a name, Ser Brienne, best speak it plain. She met his gaze without flinching. Stannis Baratheon, she said. I have seen him at a distance. Court years ago. The jaw, the set of his mouth. It was like his, though made of smoke. Loras swore under his breath. A word unbecoming of a lord's son, but honest. Margaery's eyes flickered, the only outward sign of a thought quickening behind them. Renly closed his eyes, exhaling slowly through his nose. My brother was ever a hard man, he said, lids lifting again. But I thought his hardness of the old sort, iron not ice. I did not think he would invite sorcery to his table. You cannot know it was him, Catelyn insisted, though even as she spoke, she knew the protests were thin. One brother laid siege to Storm's End with ships and swords. The other camped outside its walls surrounded by banners and finery. Whose hand, if not Stannis's, would have reached for a weapon no one could see? Who else profits by my death? Renly asked. Joffrey? The boy can barely string a sentence together without his mother's hand up his back like a mummer's. Tywin Lannister is many things, but he believes in steel and gold, not ghosts. No. Stannis sits in his dark keep with his red priestess whispering in his ear of kings and flames. I have heard the talk. Talk is not proof, Catelyn said. To accuse your brother of this would tear what remains of our family's honor to shreds. Renly finished for her, a ghost of humor in his eyes. I know. Tell me, Lady Stark, if your son sent a shadow to murder his brother, would you call it justice? She flinched as if struck. The question cut deeper than any blade of darkness. For a moment, Ned's face rose before her mind's eye, and behind it, the faces of their sons. She pressed her lips together. I would call it a sin, she said quietly, and I would pray the gods turned their faces from such a son. Renly nodded, as if this confirmed something he had already known. Then we agree, he said. My brother has sinned, and the gods have failed to finish what he began. I will not do their work for them by shouting his shame from the rooftops, but neither will I sit still and wait for his shadows to grow more clever. Dawn came grudgingly to the Stormlands, as if the sky itself were loath to peer down on what the night had attempted. The eastern horizon bled from black to indigo to a sullen rose. Clouds streaked like old bruises. The camp stirred to full wakefulness, but the sounds were different now. Fewer careless laughs, more muttered prayers, the creak of leather and mail as men strapped on their armor with hands that shook slightly more than they had the day before. In the open space before his pavilion, Renly mounted a black warhorse whose breath plumed white in the chill air. The motion pulled at the fresh stitches in his neck. Pain flared, bright and sharp, but he mastered it, allowing only the smallest tightening at the corners of his mouth. He had insisted the bandage be wrapped to leave the wound half visible, a white swathe stained with a faint blush of red. A mark, but not a disfigurement. Loras watched him with a heart full to breaking. He had argued briefly that Renly should remain in bed, that the lords could be summoned to him in private. But Renly had only laughed and said, "What use is surviving a miracle if no one sees you stand afterward?" The argument had died on Loras's tongue. He knew the truth of it, however much he feared the cost. Now, as horns sounded and men streamed into formation, Loras guided his own horse to stand just behind and to the right of Renly's. Close enough to lend support if the king swayed, far enough not to shadow him. Brienne stood on the other side, a towering figure of steel, her blue cloak snapping in the cold wind. Margaery had chosen a raised platform near the front ranks, surrounded by a cluster of ladies and lesser lords, her dark hair braided with gold, so it caught the new light. Her presence set tongues wagging already. They would say the seven had spared their anointed king for her sake. Let them. Renly let the murmurs wash over him for a moment. Then he raised one gloved hand. Silence rippled outward, gradual but inexorable, until the last mutter faded and only the snort of horses and the flap of banners remained. Good men. Renly's voice rang out, roughened by the wound but carrying nonetheless. Last night, death came walking into my tent. A shiver went through the assembled ranks. Men straightened, eyes fixed on him. It came without sound, without warning, he continued. It wore no armor, bore no crest. It crept like a coward in the dark, intending to do quickly what it dared not do beneath the sun. It thought to leave you kingless before dawn. He paused, letting the words sink in, then smiled. A slow, defiant curve of the lips. But as you can see, he said, lifting his chin so the light caught the scar and bandage together. Death missed its mark. A roar answered him, instinctive and thunderous. Swords lifted, shields rattled. Men bellowed his name and titles. Some cried out thanks to the Seven. Others spat on the ground in contempt for unseen foes. The sound rushed over him, hot and wild, and for a moment he let it fill the hollow that fear had carved in his chest. Renly waited until the noise had crested, then lifted his hand again. The roar ebbed reluctantly, like a tide drawing back from rocks. I will not lie to you, he said. Assassins walk this land, knives in the dark, poisons in cups. Men who dare not face honest steel take comfort in shadows instead. Some call it justice. I call it what it is, cowardice. He let his gaze travel over the crowd, taking in the faces upturned toward him. Weathered Stormland knights with salt in their beards, fresh-faced reachmen with roses on their cloaks, hedge knights and freeriders, and men who had followed him simply because he had made them laugh once and promised them glory. They were his for now. He meant to keep them. The Seven spared me, he said, and if the words tasted of expedience on his tongue, he spoke them as if they were truth. Not because I am better than any of you, but because our work is not yet done. There is a rotten boy on my throne in King's Landing, propped up by a family whose debts and cruelties will drown this realm if not checked. There are brothers who would rather tear each other down than stand together. There is a war to be ended. He turned his head slightly, careful of the stitches, and let his gaze brush the distant silhouette of Storm's End on the horizon. It squatted dark against the paling sky, a stubborn shadow that refused to yield. In his mind's eye, he saw his brother within its walls, jaw clenched, eyes like chips of flint. I will not spend another night waiting for death to slip under my door, Renly said. We march. Not next week, not next month. Soon, the Stag and the Rose together will ride for King's Landing, and we will pull that poisoned crown from Joffrey's head and set the realm to rights. A hum of excitement ran through the ranks at that. Men nudged each other, grinning, already picturing themselves riding through the city's gates, the cheers of the small folk washing over them. And Storm's End? Someone shouted from the back. What of your brother, your grace? Renly let the question hang for a moment. When he answered, his voice had cooled, the edges of his words honed. Storm's End is a birthright I will not let bitterness destroy, he said. My brother made his choice when he named himself against me. Let him sit in his stone keep and glare at the sea. We will take the city that feeds his war, the gold that pays his men, the seat that makes kings more than dreamers. It was not an answer that satisfied justice. It would have to satisfy politics. The murmurs that followed were not entirely approving, but they were thoughtful. Men who had feared a bloody clash of brothers now saw a different path. One where they might ride to glory and pay back Lannister arrogance in coin and steel instead of being caught between Baratheon antlers. Later, when the cheering had faded and the lords had dispersed to their own tents full of hurried calculations and whispered counsel, Renly returned to the pavilion. The air inside still smelled faintly of blood, but fresh rushes covered the stains, and the bed had been stripped and remade. He ignored it, moving instead to the table where his campaign maps lay in careful disorder. Catelyn stood waiting, hands folded before her. She had not gone to see the dawn display. Her place, she had felt, was here, measuring what it meant. Brienne hovered just behind Renly's left shoulder, her sling a mute reminder of the night's strangeness. On his right, Loras and Margaery stood close enough for their shoulders to brush, united for once in something like purpose. Renly braced his hands on the table and leaned forward, the breath leaving him in a slow hiss as the motion tugged at his stitches. He did not complain. His eyes roamed the ink-painted lands, the small carved stags and roses and lions and wolves scattered across them. "King's Landing first," he said. "We break the Lannisters' hold, take the city, and crown me in the throne room they stole from my brother Robert. Once the capital is secure, the rest will follow." "And Stannis?" Catelyn asked quietly. "Will you leave your brother at your back with his anger and his shadows?" Renly's jaw tightened briefly. "I will leave him with a choice," he said. "Bend the knee to a crowned king in the city of our fathers, or sit in his fortress and starve while the realm forgets his name. If he sends more specters, we will be ready." "You think you can be ready for that?" Brienne asked, unable to keep the skepticism from her voice. "What I felt last night, steel could not cut it. Flesh could not hold it. Light held it," Catelyn said, thinking of the way the candles had flared when Brienne burst in. "Your arrival broke its power. Perhaps that will be our answer. Lamps burning in every corridor, torches at every door. No shadows left for such things to creep in. A fortress of flame," Margaery mused. "It would make for a fine story. The king who turned back death with candlelight." Renly smiled faintly. "Stories are meat and drink to kings," he said. "If the bards sing that I am beloved of the seven, spared by their grace to lead the realm out of darkness, it will make it that much harder for Stannis to claim they favor him instead." "You mean to hide what happened?" Catelyn said, more statement than question. "I mean to wield it," Renly corrected. "I will not name my brother a sorcerer and kinslayer in public. Not yet. The realm has had enough of brothers tearing each other to pieces. Let the lords believe that some nameless coward slipped past my guards with a knife and failed. Let the small folk whisper that I am touched by the gods. Between those two lies a path I can walk." He moved one of the lion markers from the Blackwater to the table's edge, flicking it aside with a small, almost careless motion. "Joffrey first," he said. "The boy is a symptom and a symbol both. Tear him down, and half the Lannisters' hold on the throne falls with him. After that, we speak to the north again." He looked up, meeting Catelyn's gaze. "Tell your son," he said, "that I will ride against the men who killed his father and broke his sisters. Tell him that when I sit the Iron Throne, I will name him Warden of the North in all but words. His people will keep their ways. I ask only that he not name himself my enemy." Catelyn thought of Robb in his tent of his own, in the far cold fields of the Riverlands, crown of bronze and iron heavy on his young head. She thought of the long road between what men promised and what they kept. Slowly, she nodded. "I will tell him," she said. "What he does with your offer is his choice." Renly inclined his head in thanks. Then he straightened, wincing as the movement pulled at his wound, and set his hand flat on the map over King's Landing. Warmth seeped from his palm into the parchment, or so it seemed in that moment. "Then it begins," he murmured, more to himself than to those around him. "The shadow failed. The sun rises. We ride." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the canvas like distant applause. Within the tent, 5 people stood around a painted map, each tracing their own private lines of hope and fear across the same inked landscape. None of them knew yet how far the ripples from one failed stroke of a shadow's sword would travel, but all of them, in their own ways, understood that the world had shifted in the dark, and there was no turning it back. The morning in King's Landing had come in sluggish and gray, as if the sky itself were nursing a hangover from too much summer. A mist clung to the slate roofs and crooked chimneys, softening the city's filth to a hazy blur. From the Tower of the Hand, Tyrion Lannister could see only so far as the first line of tiled eaves before the world dissolved into a dull, pewter smudge. He broke the wax seal with his thumb, the raven's message crackling between his fingers. The bird still sat on its perch by the window, feathers twitching, black eyes bead-bright and suspicious. Tyrion ignored it. His own eyes were on the cramped, spidery script that marched across the parchment. He read the first line once, then again more slowly. "Alive," he murmured, almost to himself. Across the room, Varys shifted on his stool. "Forgive me, my lord?" The eunuch's hands were folded neatly in his lap, soft and pale, though Tyrion knew there was nothing soft about the man who wore them. Tyrion looked up. "Renly Baratheon," he said, still drawing breath. "Someone tried to see to that last night in his camp outside Storm's End, but the attempt failed." Varys's brows rose a delicate fraction. "Our king's dear, charming younger brother," he said softly. "How very inconvenient for some." "For us, you mean," Tyrion said. He pushed away from the window and crossed to the table, the raven's scroll flapping loosely in his hand. Stannis on one side, Renly on the other, Robb Stark chewing at the riverlands in the middle. 3 kings and a boy who thinks he is one. For, if you listen to Balon Greyjoy muttering to his drowned god, it's a wonder the realm hasn't already torn itself into quarters like a roast at supper. He slapped the parchment down among the maps and ledgers littering the table. Inked lines crisscrossed the parchment like scars. Roads, rivers, borders. Little carved lions and stags and wolves marked the movements of armies far away from this stuffy room. "Rumor had it," Tyrion continued, "that Stannis was moving in the shadows, that something in that grim stone castle of his was not entirely, and here's a rare word in these parts, natural. Rumors are the coins the city spends most freely," Varys said. He rose and drifted closer, the scent of powder and some faint floral oil preceding him. "I have heard talk of a red priestess, a foreign god, fire and fate. Men will say anything to make sense of defeat and mischance." Tyrion's mouth twisted. "And yet," he said, tapping the scroll, "a raven out of the Stormlands tells us that Renly Baratheon's tent saw something last night that was neither steel nor arrow, and that their king walks away with a sliced throat and a stronger legend." He could almost see it. Renly laughing under canvas, surrounded by cups and flatterers and the scent of roast meat, when some shape crept out of the wall. The image sent a small shiver down his spine. Magic had its place in the songs, but Tyrion had always preferred his dangers plain and clanking. "Stannis fails to kill his brother in the dark," he said, "and in failing, he hands Renly a miracle and a story that will have every foolish knight in the Stormlands swearing, he's truly the Seven's chosen after all. That's a kind of magic I understand very well." Varys laid a finger lightly on the map where the Roseroad snaked up toward King's Landing. "And if Lord Renly believes he has been spared for some higher purpose," he said, "might that not quicken his steps toward us?" "Oh, you may be sure of it," Tyrion said. He reached for a little golden stag and nudged it along the inked road, closer to the lion crouched at the city's heart. Stannis tried to cut his story short. Instead, he's about to give us the privilege of hosting its next chapter at our very gates. The Iron Throne squatted on its dais like some vast, sullen beast, all twisted metal and hidden teeth. Cersei Lannister sat upon it with one leg crossed over the other, the skirts of her crimson gown pooling around the blades as if to soothe them. Her hair fell in gold waves over her shoulders, a lioness at rest, or so she wished to appear. Below, the hall murmured, petitioners shuffled, courtiers whispered behind jeweled hands. The air was heavy with incense and the faint, sour tang of sweat. Too many bodies packed into stone, too many schemes broiling in close quarters. Joffrey Baratheon slouched on the smaller chair that had been set at the base of the throne to make a place for him, tapping a gloved finger impatiently against the arm. "This is dull," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Justice is rarely entertaining," Cersei replied, eyes fixed on the man pleading his case before them. A baker, she thought something about short measure of flour. It hardly mattered. The details of most supplicants' lives slid off her like rain off a slate roof. What mattered was the shape of power around them, the way the room bent toward the throne or away from it. Joffrey huffed. "Then they should at least scream more," he said. "The last man who begged for mercy had a squeal like a pig. That was amusing." She did not look at him. "A king does not seek amusement on the backs of his own subjects," she said. Robert did, Joffrey muttered. Robert was a drunk, not a king, Cersei said, the words as sharp as knives. She wished, not for the first time, that Tyrion might be present so she could cut him with them as well. Instead, her brother by marriage was tucked away in the Tower of the Hand, hoarding ravens and secrets. As if her thoughts had summoned him, the side doors creaked open. A herald's voice rose above the drone of the hall. The hand of the king, Tyrion Lannister. Cersei's jaw tightened. She watched her younger brother make his way up the aisle, head barely reaching the shoulders of the men he passed. His stride as unhurried as if he walked into a brothel instead of a battlefield of eyes. He bowed with exaggerated flourish. "Your Grace," he said to Joffrey, then turned his mismatched gaze on Cersei. "Sister." "Tyrion," she said, each syllable coated in frost. "You disturb our business." "I come bearing news," he said. "The sort that disturbs whether I speak it here or in some cold little chamber with only rats for audience, so I thought, why not share it with the whole court? We could all use a little morning excitement." Joffrey perked up at that. "Is someone dead?" he asked hopefully. "In a manner of speaking," Tyrion said. "King Stannis Baratheon's hopes of winning this war in the shadows, for one. He sent some unorthodox assassin to do away with your dear Uncle Renly in his camp. The attempt failed." A wave of murmurs rolled through the hall. Peter Baelish's lips twitched. Pycelle wheezed something that might have been a prayer. Cersei kept her face as smooth as the surface of a still pond, though beneath the calm, her thoughts churned like the water below. "Renly lives," she said. It was not a question. "Quite vividly, so my birds say," Tyrion replied. "Knifed in the throat, but not deeply enough. Apparently, he took it as a sign the gods aren't finished with him yet. He's rallying his banners, and, if the ravens can be believed, preparing to march on us." Joffrey's eyes narrowed. "Let him come," he said. "I'll put his head on a spike and feed his body to Sere Island's dogs." "Dogs do not eat kings," Pycelle wheezed, scandalized. "They will if I tell them to," Joffrey snapped. Cersei rose from the throne in one fluid motion, letting the movement itself silence the growing buzz of voices. "Enough," she said, her gaze pinned Tyrion like an insect. "You speak of shadows and unorthodox assassins. I hear only rumors. What proof do you have that Stannis sent any such thing, or that Renly is marching anywhere?" Tyrion spread his hands, as if to say that proof in such times was a luxury. "Ravens speak of a wound and a miracle," he said. "Of a king stepping out before his men at dawn, bandage on his throat, claiming the Seven spared him for some higher purpose. In my experience, that kind of story moves armies faster than any whip." The court dissolved slowly, like sugar melting on the tongue of the day. Petitioners were dismissed. Minor lords shuffled off to breakfast and gossip. Servants dragged braziers and benches away. Joffrey stamped down from his seat, bored with anything that did not involve immediate cruelty. "I want archers on every wall," he said loudly, so all could hear his kingly commands. "If Renly comes, we'll feather him with arrows like a hedgehog." "Yes, your grace," one of the Kingsguard said dutifully. Cersei descended the last step of the dais with measured grace. Tyrion waited for her at the base, his head tilted. Up close, she could see the faint shadow of stubble on his cheeks, the smudge of ink at one cuff, signs of someone who'd spent more time with parchment than people this morning. "You overstep," she said without preamble, "announcing such things in front of the entire court. You could have brought your ravens to me in private." "And missed the opportunity to watch Pycelle try to decide whether to pray for Renly or against him?" Tyrion asked. "I would be a poorer man for it." She stepped closer, lowering her voice until only he could hear. "If you frighten the court, you frighten the city," she said. "Frightened men do foolish things, and men kept ignorant do even worse," he replied quietly. "If Renly Baratheon turns up at our gates with 80,000 swords and the court has only just heard his name, how do you think they will react? At least this way, they have a few days to wet themselves in private." Her mouth tightened. "You exaggerate," she said. Renly is a fool in green silk. His men are flower knights and second sons. We hold the city, the Red Keep, the Boy King. We have gold, walls, the fleet. We have a fleet that may or may not be where we need it, Tyrion said. We have walls that have never faced a siege from the inside and out at once. And we have a boy king who thinks archers are the answer to everything. He glanced at Joffrey, who was bragging to Ser Meryn Trant about how he would lead a sortie himself. I am simply trying to ensure we do not lose our heads to our own arrogance before Renly has the chance to take them. Stannis was the threat, Cersei said. Stannis with his ships and his dour face and his claim in law. We planned for him. We planned for Baratheon banners sailing up the Blackwater, not for roses waving at our gates. I planned for Wildfire, Tyrion said. That will burn Stormland cloth just as nicely as Dragonstone canvas. I assure you. Her eyes flashed. You and your Wildfire, she said. Do you mean to blow the city to ash to save it? I mean to make anyone who thinks to take it from us think twice, he said. Stannis, Renly, Robb Stark. If they see the Blackwater aflame, they may decide their crowns can be found somewhere less charred. You will not use that abomination against your uncle, Cersei said. Stannis is harsh, but he is Baratheon blood. My husband's brother. Our children's uncle. And Renly? Tyrion asked. He is Baratheon blood as well, no? She hesitated, just a fraction of a heartbeat. Renly is a peacock, she said. A preening boy playing at king with Tyrell gold. If he lays siege to my city, I will starve his roses of water until they wilt. But I will not let you set half the river on fire and burn us all with it. Tyrion sighed. Then you had best hope, he said, that Renly Baratheon is less stubborn than he has shown himself in every other matter of his life. The wind on the city walls tasted of salt and coal smoke, a mixture that clung to the back of the throat. Tyrion pulled his cloak tighter about him as he walked along the ramparts, Bronn's long-legged stride matching his shorter one with diffident ease. Below, the Blackwater Bay stretched out in a dull blue-gray sheet, speckled with ships. Most lay at anchor, masts swaying lazily. A few smaller boats moved between them, ferrying cargo and men. From this vantage, King's Landing looked almost peaceful, its stink muted by distance. So, Bronn said, squinting out toward the mouth of the Blackwater. This Renly, they say he's got half the bloody South marching behind him. Half the South, 3/4 of the fools, and all of the singers, Tyrion said. He's handsome, he's charming, and he survived something he probably shouldn't have. People like that. Will they like him enough to open the gates? Bronn asked, jerking his chin toward the city behind them. If he turns up looking pretty in green armor and waving his antlers about, how many of your brave little goldcloaks do you think will remember they're supposed to die for Joffrey instead? That is a question that keeps me from enjoying my wine, Tyrion said. He paused by a crenel and rested his elbows on the stone, peering down. Below, a cluster of goldcloaks were drilling in the courtyard, their movements only vaguely resembling the crisp maneuvers Ser Jacelyn Bywater tried to beat into them. You've spoken to their new commander? Tyrion asked. Bywater. Grim man, Bronn said. Walks like he's got a pike up his arse. But he's less crooked than the last one. That's something. High praise, coming from you, Tyrion said dryly. His gaze slid back to the bay. To most eyes, it was simply water and ships. To his, it held other shapes. Barrels tucked away in dark holds, thick green liquid sloshing behind sealed staves, glass jars waiting in shadow. We need time, he said. Time for my little arrangement with the Alchemists' Guild to bear fruit. Time to line the river with enough wildfire that anyone looking at it will see not water, but a grave. Bronn snorted. You sure you want to trust a bunch of old men who smell of piss and smoke? He asked. Wildfire's the sort of thing that tends to go where it pleases once it's lit. Which is why I plan to be very careful about where we light it, Tyrion replied. And when, and why? And if Renly decides not to bring his fleet up the river at all? Bronn asked. If he just sits outside the walls and waits for us to starve, Wildfire won't feed the small folk. No, Tyrion said, but it might feed their fear. A city that fears its enemies more than it hates its rulers is one that stays loyal. Or loyal enough. He pushed away from the wall. Come, he said, let's go visit some men who play with green fire and call it wisdom. If we're to meet a king who survived the shadows, we might as well have our own nightmares bottled and ready. The Alchemist's Guildhall crouched in one of the older quarters of King's Landing, its stone dark with age, its narrow windows hooded as if to keep its secrets from leaking out. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of smoke, acrid and bitter, and something else beneath it, an oily sweetness that clung stubbornly to the back of the tongue. Tyrion followed Wisdom Haleen down a close, winding corridor lined with shelves. Glass jars squatted in their niches, each one filled with liquid that glowed a sickly green even in the dimness. Bronn eyed them warily, as if expecting one to leap from its perch of its own accord. Marvelous, is it not, my lord Hand? Haleen's voice dripped satisfaction. He was a round man, his guild's chain gleaming across his chest. The substance of legends. When Aerys Targaryen reigned, we thought our art would reach its highest flower. Alas, his enthusiasms were somewhat curtailed. Yes, my father had a way of curtailing certain enthusiasms, Tyrion said, usually with fire and steel. Now here we are again, talking about burning things. Haleen chuckled, a sound that did not quite reach his eyes. Wildfire is not mere flame, he said. It is a gift of the gods. It burns hotter than any common fire, even upon water. Stone cannot contain it. Steel cannot quench it. Once lit, it devours until there is nothing left to feed upon. How reassuring, Bronn muttered. Tyrion stepped closer to one of the jars. The liquid within seemed to shift as he watched, slow and viscous, a green so deep it was almost black at the center. A candle set nearby reflected in its surface. Its flame stretched and bent into uncanny shapes. How many have you made? He asked without looking away. 4,000 jars, my lord, Haleen said. Pride plumped his words. And with the king's continued patronage, we shall have many more before the fleets are upon us. Fleets, Tyrion echoed. You speak as though there will be more than one. Haleen spread his hands. Word reaches even our humble hall, he said. Lord Stannis on Dragonstone with his ships. Lord Renly in the south with his Reachmen allies. The tales say he commands a host the likes of which the realm has not seen since Aegon first set foot upon its shores. Who knows which of them will come to our gates first? Tyrion considered that. In most men's mouths, such talk would be idle speculation. From an alchemist, it held a different weight. Men drawn to flame tended to sniff out where it would burn next. Whoever comes, he said, will find the Blackwater less welcoming than they remember. I want these jars moved, surreptitiously. No fanfare, no clattering carts to panic the small folk. Place them in the cellars along the riverfront, beneath the walls, anywhere we might want a sudden patch of sea to become something less navigable. Haleen's eyes shone. It will be as you command, my lord Hand, he said. When the time comes, a single spark will suffice. Tyrion's gaze drifted back to the jars. Renly Baratheon's face rose in his mind again. Laughing on a tourney field, grinning beside Robert as they shared some crude jest, boyish and bright. Hard to picture that face through a curtain of green flame. See that the spark answers to us, he said quietly. Not to some careless boy with a torch and an itch. I do not intend to win this war by accidentally turning our own docks into a pyre. Far from the city's stink and stone, the Roseroad unspooled like a dusty brown ribbon across the soft green of the Reach. Renly Baratheon's army flowed along it, a living river of men and steel, banners snapping in the evening breeze. The Stag of Storm's End and the Rose of Highgarden flew side by side, their colors bright against the deepening blue of the sky. From a low ridge overlooking the encampment, Renly sat his horse with the easy poise of a man born to such views. The bandage at his throat was cleaner now, a thin white line beneath his beard where the wound peeked out. He wore simpler armor than he had at Storm's End. Still green and gold, still handsomely wrought, but less ostentatious. A king on the march rather than a peacock at tournament, or so he hoped it appeared. Below, cook fires winked into being one by one, dots of orange light studding the plain. The smell of roasting meat and fresh bread drifted up, making his stomach growl in treacherous counterpoint to the pain at his neck. Men shouted and laughed, the sounds carrying faintly on the wind. Horses stamped, harnesses jingling. It was a good sound, Renly thought. The sound of an army that believed it was marching toward victory. Loras Tyrell reined in beside him, white cloak fluttering, the rose of his house clasped over his heart. "We could be in sight of King's Landing in less than a fortnight at this pace," he said. "Sooner if we push the men. And have half the green boys in that host drop from their saddles with bleeding thighs?" Renly shook his head. "I want them fresh when they see those walls, not limping." "Walls don't bleed," Loras said. "Men do. Best to tire them early." "Spoken like a true knight," Renly replied, amusement edging his tone. "But I would rather they remember why they ride with me when they see that damned city. Let them laugh tonight. Let them drink. Tomorrow, we speak to them of justice and crowns." Behind them, Margaery Tyrell approached at a more sedate pace, her emerald riding gown draped over a palfrey, as if she sat at some garden party rather than on the edge of war. A guard of Tyrell men-at-arms rode in a loose half-circle around her, more for show than necessity. She drew level with them, examining the sea of tents with a cool, assessing eye. "It is impressive," she said softly. "From a distance. Up close, it smells of horse and sweat and onions." "War, my lady, is rarely fragrant," Renly said. "And yet men compose songs about it," she replied. "No one will sing of the flies buzzing over the latrines, only of banners in the sunset and the clash of steel." Brienne of Tarth sat a little behind and to Renly's left, as was becoming habit. A pale shadow in steel and blue. Her arm had healed enough that she no longer needed the sling, though the memory of that bone-deep cold still woke her in the small hours, hand clenched around the phantom of a hilt she had never quite grasped. Catelyn Stark rode apart, a few lengths away, her gaze turned northward more often than east. She had argued to leave his camp at Storm's End, to return to her son with news of what she had seen, but Renly had pressed her to remain a little longer. "Just until we're on the road, my lady. Your counsel will be worth more with King's Landing in sight than any raven." In the end, she had agreed, though each mile south felt like a thread pulled taut between her and Robb. Now, as dusk painted the host in softer colors, she watched Renly and the Tyrells, these bright southerners with their easy smiles and carefully arranged loyalties. They glittered, she thought, like glass in sunlight. Beautiful but sharp at the edges and brittle beneath the right pressure. "You think to overawe them," she said, nudging her horse closer. "The Lannisters, the small folk in the city, with the sight of all this." Renly smiled. "If I have learned anything of King's Landing, my lady, it is that a grand entrance can win you more hearts than a dozen good deeds," he said. "When they see this host, the people will remember Robert's victory over the Mad King. They will see his brother come to set things right again. Or they will remember Aerys's Wildfire," she said quietly, "and wonder what sort of fire the next king will bring." The small council chamber was a narrow, gloomy room, its stone walls hung with moth-eaten banners that had seen better reigns. A long table of dark wood dominated the space, scarred by years of elbows and spilled wine. Tyrion sat at its head, the hands badge heavy on his doublet, watching the others file in. Cersei came first, her gown a slash of crimson in the drear. She took a seat without acknowledging him, smoothing her skirts with careful fingers. Peter Baelish followed, all smiles and soft leather, eyes flicking about the room as if counting invisible coins. Grand Maester Pycelle shuffled in, his beard trembling with each step. Varys drifted to his usual place like a pale, silent cloud. "Shall we begin?" Tyrion asked. I doubt Renly Baratheon will wait politely at the city gates while we finish our morning quarrels. Has there been more word? Baelish asked, lacing his fingers. About our handsome young rival? Tyrion flicked a look at the map in the middle of the table. Someone, likely Varys, had already moved the little stag marker further up the Roseroad since he'd last seen it. He is marching, he said, with a host large enough that even if half the numbers are exaggeration, we still have cause to be concerned. Stormland knights, Reachmen levies, Tyrell gold to feed them all. Money well spent, Baelish murmured. I wonder what Mace Tyrell thinks he will gain from setting his daughter on Renly's lap instead of keeping her safe in Highgarden. For a man like Mace, the answer is simple, Varys said. Everything. Cersei's fingers drummed on the table. Renly does not have dragons, she said. He does not have a fleet the size of Stannis's. He has a pretty smile, a foreign bride, and an army that will wither if we cut off its supplies. Let him sit outside the walls and rot. And who will rot with him? Tyrion asked. Our small folk, if we do not have enough grain to keep them fed once the roads are cut. Siege is a double-edged sword, sister. It cuts both ways. Then we ride out and smash him, she said. We have men. The City Watch. The King's Guard. The City Watch is a rabble with spears, Tyrion said. As for the King's Guard, well, we have men in white cloaks, certainly. Whether they are truly sworn to anything but their own comfort is another matter altogether. Pycelle cleared his throat. Ahem. If I may, my lords, my lady. He peered at them over his beard. Perhaps we place too much weight on this Renly. The Lord of Storm's End has always been fanciful. To think he could march on the capital, overturn his nephew's throne. Why, when I was a young man, when you were a young man, the Targaryens still had all their teeth, Baelish said pleasantly. And Wildfire was not just something the guild made in back rooms for bored kings. Tyrion suppressed a smile. Renly is not to be dismissed, he said. Fanciful or not, he holds Storm's End in all but name, Highgarden by marriage, and the loyalty of men who remember Robert in his prime and see his shadow in his younger brother. If he rings this city in steel, half the lords who have sworn to Joffrey will start thinking how much prettier their daughters would look in green. Cersei's lips thinned. You speak treason as if it were a jest, she said. I speak truth, Tyrion replied. If we are to hold this city against him, we must know how he thinks. Renly likes grand gestures. He will not sneak up on us. He will want to show banners, horns, a sea of men. That helps us to a point. And if he does as you say? Varys asked gently. If he parades his host before our walls, and the small folk look down from their windows and see a laughing king who has survived the shadows, while inside these walls they hear only of a boy who orders tongues torn out and hands cut off, then, Tyrion said, we ensure that when they look down at the river, they see dragons, not stags, green ones. The city felt different, even to someone who had never known it any other way. Sansa Stark could sense it in the way people moved, in the sharpness of their voices, in the way their eyes slid upward whenever a bit of sky showed between the leaning roofs. Fear had its own scent, she thought. It smelled like old smoke and sour wine, like too many bodies pressed too close. She walked beside Sandor Clegane, his long strides forcing her to take 2 steps for every one of his. The hound loomed, scarred face turned outward toward the crowd, hand resting on the hilt of his sword. He moved like a man who expected trouble at every corner and would be mildly disappointed if it did not appear. Keep close, little bird, he growled as a cart piled with cabbages rattled past, forcing them into a narrow gap between a tanner's stall and a fishmonger's table. Half these fools would trample you underfoot for a copper if they thought no one was watching. I am close, Sansa said, swallowing. The smells assaulted her, fish and tanning acid and human sweat, overlaid with a yeastier aroma from a nearby baker's stall. A singer had taken up a position on an overturned crate, plucking at a lute, voice rising above the babble. And the king who would not die, with a scar upon his throat, he sang. The stag who stood where shadows fell and turned aside their note. A cabbage hit him square in the shoulder. "Sing about King Joffrey, you idiot," the thrower shouted. "You want your tongue torn out? Renly Baratheon's no king here," another voice snarled. "He can stay in the Reach and marry his flowers. Say what you like," a woman muttered nearby, tucking a stray strand of hair back beneath her scarf. "My cousin's boy is in his host," says the man, smiles like the sun and eats at a long table with all his knights. Says he walks among them like they're all brothers. "Our Joffrey ever walk among us? Does he?" "Shut your mouth," her neighbor hissed. "Walls have ears and eyes." Sansa's cheeks burned. She wanted to speak up, to say Joffrey was good and brave, that he would protect them all because that was what she was supposed to say. But the words stuck. She had seen too much of how he laughed when men screamed, how he looked when he held a crossbow. Sandor's hand closed on her arm, not gently but not cruelly either. "You hear that?" he murmured, his breath hot at her ear. "They're already singing about your king's uncle. Songs can be sharper than swords in a place like this." "He's not my king's uncle," Sansa said automatically, then stopped. The blood in her veins felt suddenly too loud. "Not by blood, no," Sandor said. "But these idiots don't care whose seed went where. They see Baratheon yellow and black, Lannister red and gold, Tyrell green, and they pick whatever color looks most likely to keep them fed." A group of goldcloaks pushed through the crowd ahead, their mail glinting dully. The Hound shifted, putting himself slightly between Sansa and the soldiers as they passed. One of them, a young man with a patchy beard and tired eyes, caught a snatch of the singer's tune and snorted. "If Renly comes here," he said to his companion, "I'll be tossing this cloak for a green one soon as the gates open. He's paying double what we get, they say." His friend elbowed him sharply. "Shut it," he hissed. "You want the imp's dogs on you? Or worse, the queen's?" They disappeared into the throng. Sansa's heart hammered. She knew she ought not to have heard. She knew, too, that the words would echo in her head later in the dark. "Toss this cloak, toss this cloak." Dusk draped itself over the city like a shawl, soft and deceptive. The worst of the day's heat bled away, leaving the stones of the wall still warm beneath Jacelyn Bywater's boots. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, shoulders squared, watching the line of the horizon darken. Tyrion joined him without fanfare, his shorter figure a familiar silhouette against the brazier's glow. The hand of the king had taken to walking the walls more often than most men of his rank, Bywater had noticed. It was a habit he approved of. A man who meant to hold a city should know the feel of its stones under his feet. "Quiet," Tyrion said, leaning on the crenel as if he were some idle tourist. "For now," Bywater replied. His voice was roughened by years of shouting orders. "We had a bit of trouble down in Flea Bottom earlier. Singer got too clever with his songs. Some of the lads in my cloaks were slow to shut him up." "Slow," Tyrion echoed. "Not reluctant?" Bywater hesitated. He was not a man given to lying, especially not when he knew the other man valued unvarnished truths. "Some of them," he said at last. "Remember Renly Baratheon from when he was the king's brother here, the small council meetings, the feasts. He smiled at them, joked with them, tossed them a coin now and again. Men remember that." "And Joffrey?" Tyrion asked. "What do they remember of him?" Bywater's mouth tightened. "They remember him ordering men beaten for failing to bow fast enough," he said. "Ordering tongueless Tim's name made literal. They remember the riot after the bread shipments failed, and how the king laughed when a man's arm was torn off." "Yes, well," Tyrion said, "our beloved nephew has a gift for public relations. If he were not king, I'd suggest he take Baelish's post." Bywater grunted. "If Renly turns up with that host they say he has," he said, "some of my men will be tempted. They're not blind. They see which way the wind blows." Tyrion turned to study him. "And you, Ser Jacelyn?" he asked. "Which way do you lean when the wind picks up?" Bywater met his gaze squarely. "I swore an oath," he said simply. "To the crown, whoever wears it. I may not like the boy or what he does, but my word's the only thing between me and being just another sellsword with a stolen cloak. I hold it. Others, he shrugged. Others are less particular. Tyrion nodded slowly. Then we must give them reasons, he said, to remember their oaths. Coin for one, a full belly for another, and fear if it comes to it. We're stretched thin as it is, Bywater said. You want the watch on the walls, in the streets, and guarding the keep. Something will give. Then we make sure what gives isn't the gate, Tyrion said. He looked back out at the gathering dark. Renly thinks he's marching toward a city of fools and cowards. Let's at least make him work for that victory in his songs. Bywater followed his gaze. Far off, beyond the limit of sight, a host moved. He could feel it, as one feels a storm building beyond the horizon. The air tasted different, charged with something that was not yet here but would be soon. The first glimpse of King's Landing came in the gray before dawn, a smudge of darker shadow on the eastern horizon. By the time the sun had cleared the low hills, the walls were visible, a jagged line of stone bristling with towers. The Red Keep crouched above it all, its mass a familiar insult to any who had ever chafed beneath the Lannisters' rule. Renly's host settled on the plain before the city like a great beast folding its limbs. Tents went up in ordered rows, cookfires were lit, horses watered. The banners rose again, a forest of cloth and color facing the dull brown of the walls. From the city, horns sounded in wary answer. That night, the lights of the army and the lights of the city stared at each other across the dark like two camps of stars. Outside Renly's pavilion, a smaller circle formed around a portable table. The map they had pored over so often lay unrolled upon it, stones weighting the corners against the mischievous fingers of the wind. The king himself stood at its head, his cloak thrown back, the bandage at his throat visible above his collar. Loras Tyrell stood to his right, helm tucked under one arm. Margaery Tyrell and Catelyn Stark flanked his left, Brienne of Tarth just behind his shoulder. So, Renly said, tracing a finger along the river line, here we are. Catelyn looked toward the city. In the dark, it was harder to see the grime, the crowded slums, the ragged shanties that clung to the outer walls like barnacles. The Red Keep rose above them all, its outline hard and sharp against the sky. Somewhere inside those walls, she thought, Sansa lived. Alone, or as alone as a girl could be in a court full of enemies and strangers. You have made it sound so simple, she said. Ride to King's Landing, show your strength, and the city will open its gates to you and cast Joffrey down. You speak as if they have no minds of their own, no fears. They have fears, Renly said. That is precisely what I count on. He pointed toward the plain where his army slept. They will see this, he said. They will see that the boy on their throne has angered 3 kings now, Robb, Stannis, myself. They will remember Robert and the joy when he came to free them from the Mad King. They will look at my face and see his, and ask themselves whether they want to starve behind those walls for a cruel boy and his lioness mother, or feast under a laughing king who has already stared down death once and won. And if they decide to hold? Loras asked. If Tyrion Lannister, for all his jokes, has more sense than to let fear do our work for us, then we build ladders, Renly said. We bring up the rams, we cut the roads and starve them. But I would rather win this city with a show than a slaughter. It will make the work of ruling what comes after easier. Margaery's fingers rested lightly on the map, near the little lion carved to mark the city. They will not yield only to banners, she said. The small folk especially. They will want assurances that their lives will not grow harder, that the change of kings will not mean a change to their own hunger. Then we give them assurances, Renly said. Bread from the Reach, grain from the Stormlands. We open the gates and flood the markets with food. We show them that their bellies will be more full with me than with Joffrey. Catelyn glanced at Brienne, who had been silent. The knight's gaze was fixed on the distant walls, the faint pinpricks of torchlight along their crowns. You do not speak, Sir Brienne, Renly said, noticing her silence. "Do you see something the rest of us do not?" "I see walls," she said. "High, thick walls. And men behind them who will not be easily cowed. I see a city that remembers the last time a king's brother came with an army. There was fire then and much blood. They may fear that more than they fear hunger." Renly's hand went briefly to his throat. The night felt colder suddenly, though the fire in the brazier crackled merrily. "This time will be different," he said more softly. "No mad king, no dragons, no wildfire." He believed it or wanted to. Far away, in the city crouched beneath the red keep, glass jars slumbered in their cellars, their green contents dreaming of flame.